Welcome to the Federal Aviation Administration's virtual public workshop for the draft environmental assessment of the proposed RNAV GPS approach procedure at Boston Logan International Airport. I'm Colleen D'Alessandro, Regional Administrator for the FAA's New England region. Joining me today are several members of the team who worked on the draft EA. They will assist me in answering your questions. I'll start with Veranda Johnson. Veranda is our Environmental Protection Specialist for the FAA.
Hello, everyone.
Next, we have Rusty Baird. Rusty is the Support Manager at the Boston Terminal Radar Approach Control, TRACON, one of the air traffic control facilities that will direct flights on the proposed procedure.
Thank you, Colleen. Good morning, everyone.
Next, we have Donovan Johnson. Donovan is the Technical Project Lead for Rovolus, the company that conducted the environmental assessment.
Thank you, Colleen. Good morning, everyone.
Next, we have Steve Getzinger. Steve is the Deputy Project Manager with Environmental Science Associates, a subcontractor that worked on the environmental assessment with Rovolus.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Happy to be here.
And lastly, we have Douglas Willey. Doug is an Airbus A320 captain with a major U.S. airline, representing the Airline Pilots Association International, ALPA. Captain Willey has been flying professionally for over 20 years and flies into Boston frequently. He'll answer questions from a pilot's perspective.
Thanks, Colleen. Good morning, everybody.
This is the first of two virtual workshops that we're holding to share information and answer your questions about the draft environmental assessment of the proposed new approach procedure. We're recording the workshops and we'll post them at FAA-BostonWorkshops.com and on the FAA YouTube page, so residents who are unable to participate in the workshops can view them later. Questions and comments made during the workshops will not be considered as official comments on the draft environmental assessment. We will not document them for the legal record. To make an official comment, please go to FAA-BostonWorkshops.com to make an online comment. Email a comment to FAA-BostonWorkshops@ESASSOC.com or mail it to the address on the screen. The comment period closes on November 20th. Please note, if you include your address, phone number, email address, or other personal identifying information in your comment, it may be made available publicly. That includes questions submitted at this workshop or comments made through the official methods, online, email, or US mail. You can ask us in your comment to withhold personal information from public disclosure. However, we can't guarantee that we'll be able to do so. During the workshop, you may submit questions by clicking the Q&A icon at the bottom of the Zoom window. A window will open and you may enter your question. People who are watching the workshop on FAA's YouTube or Facebook pages may enter questions in the chat areas or comment boxes. If you're listening on the phone, you can text us a question at 617-237-0734. And let me repeat that number, 617-237-0734. We'll answer as many questions as time allows that pertain to the environmental assessment. Questions that are repetitive may not be answered. And also, we're unable to answer questions about any other topic during this workshop. Thank you for joining us today. As a reminder, please use the Q&A icon to submit questions. You may submit questions at any time. And we'll now begin with a video that will summarize the NEPA process, the proposed project, the EA findings, and give a walkthrough of the noise visualization tool.
The FAA is proposing a new instrument approach procedure to runway 4 left at Boston Logan International Airport. This new procedure will enhance safety for approaching aircraft and will enable the airport to operate more efficiently under poor weather conditions. Implementation of a new procedure is a federal action with the potential to cause environmental impacts, so the FAA must comply with the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, to move forward with the project. NEPA requires federal agencies to consider the potential environmental impacts by conducting environmental review, give agencies information to help them make informed decisions. For certain actions, require public disclosure of environmental impacts. The FAA completed a preliminary technical and environmental review of the procedure in March 2016, which determined that an environmental assessment and EA was required. The EA studied whether the proposed new procedure has the potential to result in significant environmental effects. We completed the draft EA in September 2020, and it now is the public review and comment period. The draft EA summarizes the purpose and need of the project, assesses the alternatives considered to meet the purpose and need, identifies the environmental categories most likely to be affected, and documents potential environmental impacts across these categories. The comment period ends on November 20th, 2020. The FAA will review and address all comments in the final EA before deciding whether to move forward with the proposed procedure. Public comments are an integral part to the environmental review process. The FAA opened a 60-day public comment period when it published the draft EA. The comment period began on September 21st and ends on November 20th, 2020. We encourage you to submit comments through the comments page on the project website, emailing your comment to the email address listed, or mailing your comment to the address listed. We will review all comments we receive during the comment period, and we will respond to the comments in the final environmental assessment. Question, comments, and answers submitted discussed during the public workshop will not be considered as formal public comment on the environmental assessment and will not be documented as part of the environmental assessment. If you would like your question, comment to be included as part of the environmental assessment, please submit your comments in writing as I outlined for it to be officially addressed in the EA. Please watch the following animation that describes the proposed action, and I'll return after the video to summarize the findings of the EA.
Boston Logan International Airport is the primary airport serving the Boston metropolitan area. It is owned and operated by the Massachusetts Port Authority, Massport. The airport is located just 1 mile east of downtown Boston in the Mass Turnpike. In 2019, the airport recorded a total of 427,176 takeoffs and landings. It is among the top 20 busiest airports in the nation. The airport has 6 runways with 2 pairs of parallel runways that range from 2,500 to more than 10,000 feet long. The airport can accommodate 120 takeoffs and landings per hour during good weather conditions and 60 takeoffs and landings per hour in poor weather conditions. The draft environmental assessment studied a proposed new path for aircraft to land on runway 4 left at the airport. The proposed new procedure originates southwest of the airport. The proposed new procedure will provide lateral and vertical guidance for aircraft on approach to runway 4 left. It will enable continuous descent to the runway and offer a more predictable, consistent, and stabilized approach path, which improves safety. The proposed new procedure includes 2 charted transitions, Nunzio and Wounds, and 2 uncharted transitions, the Cape area and left downward transitions. We project that 359 flights will use the proposed new procedure each year. For context, in 2019, a total of 6,416 aircraft landed on runway 4 left. These transitions are 2 paths for aircraft to use to reach the final approach path. Aircraft arriving from the south transition into the approach procedure at the charted fix Nunzio, and then follow the charted procedure along the waypoints to runway 4 left. We expect 179 aircraft to use the Nunzio transition each year. Aircraft arriving from the southwest will transition into the approach procedure at Wounds and then follow the charted procedure along the waypoints to runway 4 left. We expect 18 aircraft to use the Wounds transition each year. Aircraft arriving from airports on Cape Cod, the islands, and other points east and southeast will transition into the procedure north of Al and south of Leveron. The approaching aircraft will then follow the charted procedure to runway 4 left. The green tracks are an example of traffic that would use the proposed new procedure. We expect 54 aircraft to use the Cape area transition each year. Aircraft arriving from the west and north will fly to the west of the airport parallel to runway 4 left, before turning to transition into the procedure between Leveron and Mattapan. The orange tracks are an example of traffic that would use the proposed new procedure. We expect 108 aircraft to use the left downward transition each year. The black border defines the General Study Area, or GSA for short. The GSA includes every area where potential environmental impacts might occur from the proposed new procedure. It was defined to encompass the geographic area where an aircraft flight path could be affected up to 10,000 feet above the ground. The GSA for this project encompasses 1,173 square miles across Middlesex, Norfolk, Plymouth, and Suffolk counties. The draft environmental assessment studied and considered all impacts from the proposed new procedure within the GSA.
The potential environmental impacts and estimated use of the procedure was considered for the applicable categories in NEPA. They are fully summarized in the draft environmental assessment. The noise impacts from aircraft activity without the proposed procedure and the noise impacts from aircraft activity, including the proposed procedure, were calculated using the Aviation Environmental Design Tool, or AEDT. AEDT is the FAA's approved model for assessing noise and emissions at civilian airports. The noise impacts were calculated both with and without the proposed procedure for all 27,080 census blocks within the general study area as designated by the United States Census Bureau. When the two sets of noise impacts were compared, there were no significant or reportable noise impacts from the implementation of the proposed procedure. When compared to the no action impacts, the aircraft activity included on the proposed new procedure did not have an appreciable effect on the noise exposure ranges associated with the noise-sensitive communities south of the airport. This is shown in the table summarizing noise exposure by neighborhood. For a more detailed look to the noise level in your neighborhood, please use the noise visualization tool at FAABostonWorkshops.com. You can enter your address and see the calculated noise level of the proposed procedure in your neighborhood. Local air quality emissions were calculated for the no action and proposed action alternatives for all pollutants regulated by the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. Only carbon monoxide was calculated to increase by just 0.001 short tons per year in the general study area. This increase is far less than the EPA's regulatory limits for carbon monoxide, which is an increase of 100 short tons per year. The increase in greenhouse gas emissions from the proposed procedure is just 0.2 tons of carbon dioxide per year. For context, the annual emissions from the state of Massachusetts are over 66 million metric tons per year. The impact on historic properties must be considered. It must be coordinated and approved by the Massachusetts Historical Commission. Within the general study area, we identified 70,142 properties for potential impacts from the proposed procedure. The analysis showed a maximum increase in the overflights of just 0.54%. All of the identified historic properties already have overflights. The change in noise exposure level was also assessed at each of the historic properties with the maximum DNL change of 0.14 decibel. The draft EA anticipate a finding of no significant impact to historic resources. However, this is a preliminary finding, preliminary pending further consultation with the Historical Commission and other consultant parties. The property identified in Section 4F of the Department of Transportation Act of 1966. Section 4F properties for short are public parks, recreation areas, or wildlife refuge. In accordance with NEPA, Section 4F properties must not be substantially diminished when exposed to the proposed action. A total of 11,803 Section 4F properties were identified within the GSA and reviewed for possible impacts. For all of these Section 4F properties in the general study area, we identified no significant or reportable noise impacts using the NEPA noise impact criteria. When considering all Section 4 properties with a no action noise exposure level of DNL 45 decibels or greater, the maximum change in noise exposure level was 0.17 decibels. The project website includes an interactive map that depicts noise levels in the general study area of the draft environmental assessment. This map shows the model noise levels from the environmental assessment for multiple impact categories. This walkthrough is to help you understand and navigate the multiple sets of data in this interactive map. You can find the interactive map on the project webpage under Noise Visualization. Once you have clicked on Noise Visualization, you will see the interactive map at the center of the page with the layer list to the right on the page. The layer list allows you to turn on and off the layers depicted on the map. The map initially displays layers for the general study area, the proposed new procedure, and noise levels at population centroids. To view information on each layer, click on the arrow next to each layer to see the legend. In the example of noise levels at population centroids, you can see that each dot represents a different model noise level. The noise levels on this map are in DNL, which stands for Day-Night Average Sound Level, and is the standard noise metric used by the FAA. The levels were generated using the Aviation Environmental Design Tool, FAA's software system that is used to model aircraft noise. Now let's see the potential noise level for a specific area. Using the search bar in the top left corner, you can look at the noise levels around a specific landmark. For example, to look at the noise levels around the Milton Public Library, you just need to type in Milton Public Library or the corresponding address and select the correct location that appears. You can see the map has zoomed into the location. The blue dots surrounding the location indicate that Milton Town Hall is in an area where noise levels ranging between 45 and 50 DNL. If we select one of these dots, we can see the noise levels without the proposed new procedure or baseline noise exposure, and with the proposed new procedure or alternative noise exposure. Now let's see what the potential noise are at a Section 4F property. Section 4F is just a NEPA term for public parks or recreation areas. To see potential noise levels to these properties, turn on the appropriate layer in the layer list. I'm going to turn on DOT Act Section 4F properties, noise levels, and turn off noise levels at population centroids. Now I am depicting the 4F properties and their modeled noise levels within the general study area. Now let's see the modeled noise levels at the Franklin Park Zoo. Using the search bar, type in Franklin Park Zoo. Select the green dot. Here we can see the noise levels at this location are approximately 53.17 DNL without the proposed new procedure and 53.14 DNL with the proposed new procedure, representing a decrease of 0.03 DNL. If we are interested in knowing the noise level at historic and cultural resources, we can follow the same approach as Section 4F properties. I can select the layer I want to see by turning off the Section 4F noise levels layer and turn on the historic and cultural resources noise levels, and search for the John F. Kennedy Library and Museum. After typing the property name, I can select the location represented in pink and see the noise levels at this location. Remember that the baseline noise exposure represents noise levels without the proposed new procedure, and the alternative noise exposure represents noise levels with the proposed new procedure. The difference of the two is the noise change at this location. We encourage everyone to use a noise visualization tool to find out more information about the noise levels in your area. This concludes our review of the EA findings. A more detailed discussion of the findings and additional impact categories can be found in the draft environmental assessment. Before we move into the question and answer portion of this workshop, we want to note again that the questions and answers discussed during the public workshop will not be considered as official comment on the draft EA. Please submit your questions by email, US mail, or the comment form at faabostonworkshops.com. to have it formally addressed in the EA.
Thank you for listening to the presentation about the proposed action and the findings of the environmental assessment. And now we would like to begin the question and answer portion of today's workshop. As a reminder, please use the Q&A icon to submit questions. If you're watching this workshop on YouTube or Facebook, you may enter questions into the comments sections below the streams. If you're listening to this workshop on the phone, you can text us a question at 617-237-0734. As a reminder to everyone, questions and comments made during the workshops will not be considered as official comments on the draft environmental assessment. To make an official comment, please go to faabostonworkshops.com to make an online comment. Email a comment to faabostonworkshops at esassoc.com or mail it to the address on the screen. The comment period closes on November 20th. My fellow panelists and I will start by answering the questions already submitted and work through the questions to try to address as many as possible. Now, on to the first question. Okay, first question is, why is an environmental assessment being done instead of an environmental impact statement? And I'm going to ask Veranda to cover that one, please.
The purpose of the environmental assessment is to assess whether there are any significant environmental impacts associated with proposed action. There are no significance criteria associated with numbers above metrics, and the FAA has not approved supplemental metrics for this EA, as total noise exposure differences at population centroids between the baseline scenario and proposed action are minimal. FAA does not intend to use any supplemental metrics at this time. DNL is the noise metric required by the FAA for National Environmental Policy Act studies. DNL includes the cumulative noise generated by multiple aircraft operations when additional weighting for operations occurring at night 10 p.m. to 6:59 a.m. to account for the increased sensibility of communities to noise occurring at night. DNL analysis may also be implemented on a case-by-case basis to better characterize specific noise impacts, but the noise values calculated were found to have no appreciable effect in the areas around the population.
Thanks, Veranda. Okay, this question is also for Veranda. Has the FAA made a final decision to implement the project?
The FAA published a draft environmental assessment which is an EA, a proposed new procedure on September 21st, 2020. The agency also opened a 60-day public comment period, which ends on November 20th, 2020. The FAA will consider all comments it receives during the comment period. No final decision will be made until the FAA reviews and considers all comments. The FAA expects to issue a final environmental determination sometime in 2021.
Thanks, Rhonda.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next question. If this new procedure was so important, why wasn't it implemented long ago? So the FAA proposed the permanent implementation of the procedure in 2015. Since that time, we've been coordinating with Massport, airlines, elected officials of potentially affected communities, and community advisory committees on the need for the procedure. Okay, the next question is again for Veranda. You're definitely first up today. So what are the number above 25 LMAX peak day 60/50 day-night noise measurements at locations affected solely by the proposed 4 left path and the 4 right RNAV path, respectively, as well as those locations affected by both paths' noise? Please show these measurement categories visually using different defined colors on the FAA visualization site.
Okay, again, I'll say this answer again. The purpose of the environmental assessment is to assess whether there will be any significant environmental impacts associated with proposed action. There are no significance criteria associated with numbers above metrics, and the FAA has not approved supplemental metrics for this EA, as total noise exposure differences at population centroids between the baseline scenario and the proposed action are minimal. FAA does not intend to use supplemental metrics at this time. DNL is the noise metric required by the FAA for the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, studies. DNL includes the cumulative noise generated by multiple aircraft operations, with an additional weighting for operations occurring at night, which is 10 p.m. to 6:59 a.m., to account for the increased sensitivity of communities to noise occurring at night. DNL analysis may also be supplemented on a case-by-case basis to better categorize specific noise impacts, but the noise values calculated were found to have no appreciable effect in the areas around the proposed procedure. Thank you, Colleen.
Thanks, Veranda. Okay, here's the next question, and this one is going to go to Donovan. For the triangle formed by the Beth Israel Hospital, St. Elizabeth's Church and Rectory, and Milton Academy, which the proposed 4 left RNAV passes over the triangle, what are the number above 25 LMAX peak day 60/50 day-night noise measurements at each of those noise-sensitive area locations?
Thank you, Colleen. So as Veranda mentioned, the environmental assessment that was completed used the FAA's required DNL metric, and no supplemental metrics have been completed at this time, and the FAA does not intend to complete supplemental metrics at this time. However, the noise analysis does show that based on the FAA's approved DNL metric, no significant impacts occurred at any of these 3 receptors.
Thanks, Donovan. Okay, next question. During the baseline year, which was November 1st, 2018 through October 31st, 2019, did any of the FAA representatives participating in this workshop, web meeting, visit Milton and experience the overflight noise of planes on the 4 left arrival paths as they existed then? And I'll cover that one. So for the Boston 4 left environmental assessment, the FAA is required to use noise modeling rather than noise measurements. You can read more about the noise modeling process in section 4.6 of the draft environmental assessment. Next question. Did the FAA consider an offset greater than 2 degrees, something that would help those that would also, something that would help those who also get noise from the 4 right approaches? And if not, why not? And I'll ask our air traffic control specialist, Rusty, to cover that one, please.
Okay, Colleen, thank you. So many different technical factors are considered when designing instrument approach procedures to include safety and efficiency. For the RNAV GPS runway 4 left, we did design this procedure at a 2-degree offset angle, which provides optimal course alignment to comply with the simultaneous offset instrument approach requirements and a stabilized approach.
Thank you. Next question is for Veranda. By including days not in use, do you agree that the FAA's DNL metric does not reflect the specific in-use noise impacts of 4 left arrival overflights? Arrivals on 4 left/4 right were in use approximately 34% of the year, according to Logan reports. But the DNL uses an average annual day, including days when 4 left is not in use. Is that correct?
Thank you, Colleen. It is correct that DNL uses a full year of operations. This is required for FAA NEPA studies. For more information, please see section 4.6 of the draft environmental assessment.
Next question. Please provide the noise contours of aircraft traveling the 4 right RNAV path and each proposed or expected 4 left path, including the 4 left RNAV path, so that residents can determine how far from each side of the parallel 4 left, 4 right paths aircraft noise extends, and what noise contour overlaps exist of noise from aircraft on the 2 parallel 4 left and 4 right paths. I'll ask Donovan to answer that one, please.
Sure, thank you, Colleen. So for air traffic studies, the FAA calculates noise at specific locations known as centroids rather than generating noise contours. However, even in cases when we generate noise contours for EAs, those are essentially, they take into account the entire traffic flow at the airport, not just traffic going to one runway or another. For more information on that noise analysis, you can see section 4.6 of the draft EA.
Okay, and I just want to add in a little bit to this one. I know we got an early question regarding adding to the noise visualization page the 4 right RNAV path. And Donovan, you can just confirm for me that was done, correct?
That was done, yes.
Yeah, so if folks want to see the 2 parallel paths, there's a layer choice in the noise visualization that Veranda described prior to the start of the question and answer session. And you can click on that to add the visualization of that 4 right path. But the noise visualization, the numbers that are shown on that visualization page are the baseline is the total noise. So it's not just one particular flight path or one particular set of
Colleen, do you want me to
the
clarify?
full. So I'm going to ask, so Steve has something to add. It's probably a lot more versed at this than me.
Yeah, so on the noise visualization tool, just to clarify, there are 2 numbers given for all of the noise values within the tool. The baseline noise exposure, that is the kind of what we kind of call the no action alternative when we're talking about it. And so that is the noise impact caused by all of the activity at the airport. So that's all arrivals and all departures without the proposed action. And then there's the alternative noise exposure, which is the noise impact from all of the activity at the airport plus the proposed new procedure.
Okay, thanks. That was probably a much clearer way of saying it. Appreciate that. Next question is, how does this new procedure actually make it more safe to fly in and out of the airport? And I'll ask Captain Willie to answer that one, please.
Thank you, Colleen. So currently, runway 4 left in Boston Logan is a visual approach runway only, which requires that the weather conditions be at or above visual conditions. And it also requires that pilots be able to see and maintain in sight the airport at all times during the approach. It also means we have a limited number of flying cues to make our approach to the runway. By adding an instrument approach, such as the 4 left RNAV that's being proposed, this adds another layer of choices and additional data, not only during visual conditions to help us make it more predictable and more repeatable, but it also allows for use of the runway in conditions that are less than visual conditions. Again, this allows for a higher level of safety and allows more predictability for both the pilots and for the air traffic and air management.
Thank you. Next question, why is an environmental assessment being done instead of an environmental impact statement, which we also know as an EIS? Rhonda?
Thank you, Colleen. There are 3 general levels of environmental review: category exclusion, an environmental assessment, and an environmental impact statement. An environmental impact statement is reserved for projects that cause a significant impact. An initial environmental review was done in 2016 to determine if category exclusion was applicable, but it was found that an environmental assessment was necessary for the proposed procedure. The technical analysis in this draft environmental assessment has determined that the proposed procedure is not expected to cause a significant impact, and as such, an environmental impact statement is not warranted.
Thank you. Next question. I'm concerned about the impact to historic properties in my community. Can you tell me more about the assessment of impacts to historic sites? And I ask Steve to answer that one.
I'd be happy to, Colleen. So to look at the impact on historic properties, first what we do is we do an inventory of all the historic sites within the general study area. And just in case that term isn't familiar, the general study area is the area on which there will be any potential change from the proposed action. So it's a very large area around Boston Logan Airport. And within that general study area, we identified all the historic sites, and that was actually more than 70,000 historic properties were identified within that area. All of those historic properties were then assessed for impacts by overflights and also noise impacts by the proposed procedure. And these analyses determined that the proposed action would not introduce overflights to any historic property that was not already overflown by aircraft, and the maximum change in noise level at historic resource in the general study area is just 0.1 dB DNL.
Thanks, Steve. And just to help folks listening in, if someone wanted to find a specific historic site, there's 70,000 is a lot. What's the best way for them to go about?
Sure, there are 2 ways. You can look them up in the appendix in the draft EA. But the better way would be to go to the project website, FAABostonWorkshops.com. In the noise visualization tool, there are layers where you can not only identify all of the historic resources there, but you can also look at the calculated noise impact at all of those historic properties for both the baseline and the alternative. So without the proposed action and with the proposed action.
Thanks. Next question. For the first year of 4 left RNAV operation, what is the expected number of flights on the proposed 4 left RNAV path and each alternative 4 left path expected to be in use, including separately visual, ILS, and any advisory use, such as by aircraft with former JetBlue special procedures data in their FMS? Where on the visualization are any such 4 left paths illustrated? Donovan?
Sure, thanks, Colleen. So the noise visualization tool does not show modeled flight paths. Additionally, there are no alternative flight paths to 4 left as it's purely a visual procedure at this point in time. For more details on how aircraft operations were represented on different flight tracks, you can take a look at section 4.6 and appendix D of the draft EA.
Okay. So before we get to the next question, I just want to give a reminder that questions and comments made during the workshops will not be considered as official comments on the draft environmental assessment. To make an official comment, please go to FAABostonWorkshops.com to make an online comment, email a comment to FAABostonWorkshops@ESASSOC.com, or mail it to the address on the screen. The comment period closes on November 20th. Additionally, questions asked during this workshop that are repetitive may not be answered. We're unable to answer questions about any other topic during this workshop or if submitted as an official comment to the draft EA. Okay, let's get back to questions and answers. And okay, the next one I have is a little bit long, and we're going to send it over to Rusty. Will aircraft with the 4 left JetBlue special procedure recorded in their FMS be allowed to request to use that procedure and to use it, or will the FAA state the 4 left RNAV will be the only arrival path to runway 4 left? With regard to that question, please also state the number of arrivals in the baseline year on the 4 left JetBlue special procedure path, the number of arrival aircraft expected to use the 4 left RNAV path in its first year of use that otherwise would have been expected to use the JetBlue special procedure, and the number of arrival aircraft, if any, expected to use the JetBlue special procedure in the first year of implementation of the 4 left RNAV path. Rusty?
Okay, Colleen, thank you. So if the new RNAV GPS runway 4 left approach procedure is implemented, the JetBlue special will not be used, and JetBlue intends to cancel the JetBlue special procedure. The JetBlue special procedure was not included in the baseline, and it has not been used by air traffic since 2014.
Great, thanks. Can you repeat the website where we can find the visualization tool? Rhonda?
Sure. The noise visualization tool can be found on the project website at FAABostonWorkshops.com. Once you arrive on the project website, you can click on the noise visualization tab.
Thanks. And I just want to add, Internet Explorer is an old browser and doesn't work too well with the site. So I would encourage you to use Chrome or one of the more modern browsers to get the optimal use of the website. Okay, next question. FAA's workshop notice states questions and answers about the EA during the workshops will not be included as part of the EA, and public comments on the EA will not otherwise be taken during workshops. Our congressman, state senator, state representative, and select board each asked FAA to provide written answers to technical questions regarding the EA. Has FAA done so? Had FAA done so, residents would have had the information available to consider before they attend this workshop. Why did you disregard our elected representatives' request that FAA provide written answers to their questions, given that FAA itself on September 21st asked those officials to submit technical questions to FAA? So the FAA held 2 virtual briefings in September 21st and 22nd, for elected officials when we released the draft environmental assessment. We briefed elected officials on the new procedure, the draft environmental assessment, and our plan for virtual public workshops. The FAA did receive questions from elected officials, and we informed the elected officials that the questions and answers would be answered in our public workshop. The public is invited to submit comments based on that information they receive during these workshops. Next question is, were test flights conducted to verify the noise modeling results? Rusty?
So Colleen, the flight checks that are performed are used to verify the design of the procedure and ensure that aircraft are able to fly the procedure as it was designed. Flight checks are like the FAA's quality control check prior to publishing the procedure. Noise modeling is not conducted during the flight check, as noise modeling is part of the NEPA process. And because there are many variables, wind, temperature, rain, snow, any weather condition that could affect the performance of a specific aircraft and the associated noise. The AEDT model takes into account numerous variables when determining noise impacts and is thus more reliable than a handful of any sort of noise monitoring that is done.
Okay, just a couple clarifications there. So, Veranda, AEDT is?
It's the Aviation Environmental Design Tool.
Okay, thanks. And Rusty, when you talk about flight checks, typically when in the process are flight checks performed, and have they been performed yet?
So Colleen, for the new procedure, the flight checks have not been done. Typically, they're done prior to implementation, and it would be they would not be done until the procedure has been approved.
Okay, so that follows the environmental assessment process.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. All right, next question. According to the presentation, there do not seem to be any concerns. Are there any negatives with this change, Rhonda?
Thank you, Colleen. There will be a slight increases and decreases in noise levels in close proximity to the airport. However, they are not considered reportable or significant. These are not arbitrary thresholds, but are objective thresholds that are used nationally when considering aircraft noise. To gain a better understanding of the changes in noise, please refer to section 4.6 in the draft environmental assessment, as well as utilizing the noise visualization tool on the website, FAA-BostonWorkshops.com. The proposed action is generally expected to cause an increase or decrease of less than 1 decibel level in noise, which is generally not perceivable by the human ear. This certainly does not mean that the community doesn't hear noise in proximity to the airport, but rather it is a comparison of proposed procedure change versus the no action alternative, which is also called the baseline alternative as well.
Okay, thanks. And so you talked about noise there. So the question, I think, is a little bit more general. So in terms of other environmental categories, were there any negative findings?
No, there were no other negative findings in any of the environmental categories addressed in the environmental assessment.
Okay, and on the project website, FAA-BostonWorkshops.com, there is an overall summary of the EA findings, and that would be a great place to look to see in a variety of the different categories what the impact was. And I'm going to ask Steve to tell me what tab is that under?
Sure, it's under project information on the EA findings subtab.
Okay, thanks. Next question. Since this is recorded, will you make this presentation available online? So yes, the recording of the workshop will be available on FAA YouTube social media website, and it will also be posted on the FAA-BostonWorkshops.com project site. And the time it takes for that to happen from the end of the project, any of my panel members know that answer to that question?
I would say it'll be a couple days, but it will be posted publicly, yes.
Okay. Next question. Does the FAA acknowledge that the triangle formed by Beth Israel, St. Elizabeth's, and Milton Academy is a noise-sensitive area for FAA which FAA should use a peak day noise above measurement. Rhonda?
Sure. The FAA is required to use DNO to calculate aircraft noise exposure for this environmental assessment. For more information on the noise analysis, please see section 4.6 of the draft environmental assessment.
Okay, so just a couple follow-ups to that. So were there any noise sensitive areas found in this draft environmental assessment?
Yes, there were noise sensitive areas found in the draft environmental assessment, but there were no reportable or significant impacts on those noise sensitive areas.
Okay. And I also want to point folks to FAA.gov. So FAA's public facing website. If you go to that site and you type in noise in the search box, that will take you to a fairly recently updated page, which describes a variety of, provides a variety of information around aircraft noise. Okay, next question is, what does DNL stand for? We toss that term around like everybody knows what we're talking about, and I'll ask Donovan to explain, please.
You're right. Thank you, Colleen. So DNL stands for day-night average sound level. As Veranda and others have mentioned a few times, this is the noise metric that's required by the FAA to be used for NEPA studies. DNL includes the cumulative noise generated by multiple airport operations, and it also includes an additional weighting for operations occurring at night, which in the case of DNL is defined as 10 p.m. to 6:59 a.m. To basically account for the increased sensitivity and annoyance to communities that occurs at night. Multiple reviews have found DNL to be the best predictor of community annoyance. It's kind of well fleshed out, and that's why we use it. Thank you, Colleen.
Why was the environmental study prepared? What did the environmental assessment study? Steve?
I like this. This is a nice general question to kind of capture everything. So the Federal Aviation Administration, or the FAA, has prepared the draft environmental assessment, or EA, to identify the potential environmental effects associated with the new proposed instrument approach procedure into runway 4 left at Boston Logan International Airport. This RNAV GPS approach into runway 4 left will provide enhanced safety for aircraft approaching the runway and will enable the airport to operate more efficiently under poor weather conditions. This proposed action is needed because currently there is no instrument approach procedure for runway 4 left, so aircraft arriving lack vertical and lateral guidance during the approach phase of flight. The draft environmental assessment takes this proposed procedure and summarizes the potential environmental impact of the proposed procedure across a number of different environmental categories. For example, the potential impact on air quality is calculated on local parks and on endangered species, all by the proposed procedure, are all assessed and summarized as part of the environmental document. And Colleen, I think as you already mentioned, a great place, you can look at the full environmental document, or there is a kind of the Cliff Notes version. You can look at the EA findings table on the project website, FAABostonWorkshops.com, in order to look at the specific environmental impact by each environmental category.
Thanks. You read my mind. Next question is for Donovan. How many flights are expected per day?
Thank you, Colleen. So essentially, the way that this was approached in the study was that we looked at the baseline time frame and considered the number of what we defined as bad weather days that were a part of that time frame. This particular procedure is essentially only going to be used when the weather is below certain conditions. And so most other days, it will not have any effect on the flight operations at the airport. However, we found 7 bad weather days during the time frame that we examined, which equals approximately 359 arrivals per year to runway 4 left. However, the number of arrivals per day will vary from 0 most days to a few on days where the weather is bad.
Okay, so we talk about bad weather, and in New England, we get a variety of different kinds of bad weather. I know this week we had 2 really, really foggy days. So I'm going to ask Rusty, if you could you just give us some examples of when we talk about bad weather, what does that really mean?
Okay, Colleen. So we refer to it as IFR days, instrument flight rules days. And for us, it's a ceiling less than 1,000 feet and visibility less than 3 miles. And it would be, as you said, a day that is cloudy. It could be hazy, could be snow, rain, or fog.
Okay. Next question. I noticed that let me restart that. I noticed that the noise over UMass Boston / JFK Library area is actually less. Can you explain why this is when the new flight path goes right over that area? And Veranda?
Sure, Colleen. The FAA performed a detailed analysis for how many flights would use the flight procedure and how use of the flight procedure would affect air traffic over other areas. For more information about this, please see Section 4.6 and Appendix D of the Draft Environmental Assessment.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else want to add anything to that? No?
I would just add that FAA modeling tools are intended to model significant or reportable impacts. When we're talking about very, very small noise changes, they're not intended to have that level of precision. So there is a lot of when you're seeing very, very small noise changes, it's hard to tell in those cases whether there will actually be a noise increase or a noise decrease. However, the noise changes are so small, they're not intended to be perceptible to the human ear either direction.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to jump in, but Donovan said it perfectly.
Okay. So when we see a number that's out to 2 decimal points, the modeling tools are really not that precise.
That's correct, Colleen. Keeping in mind that the threshold for noise significance is 1.5 dB DNL above the 65, that brings you above the 65 DNL range. So when you're talking about 0.1 dB, you're talking about orders of magnitude less noise than what would be considered a significant impact.
Okay. Next question. What is the expected AAR for visual and for instrument weather conditions once the 4 left RNAV is implemented for the 4 right / 4 left / 9 configuration? I'll ask Rusty to cover that one, but I'll ask him first to tell us all what AAR stands for first.
Okay, Colleen. So AAR is it's just an acronym we use for the arrival acceptance rate at Boston, and that's just a projected amount of arrivals we anticipate at the Boston Airport per hour. That Boston AAR is weather dependent, and it's a variable that is based on winds. Currently, the runway 9 basic arrival acceptance rate is 32. If the proposed procedure is included in the AAR, it is estimated to be 36.
Thanks. So I think we have a follow-up question here. Back to the 2 degrees offset question. I didn't hear whether other offsets also would be safe. Rusty?
Okay, Colleen. So when we design procedures, we design all of them to be safe and efficient. Safety is our number 1 priority.
Okay, next question. 4 right RNAV path on noise visualization. Please promptly provide a version of the noise visualization on the same FAA website that adds the position of the runway 4 right RNAV path so that users can find answers to these questions. Their location in relation to each of the closely spaced parallel runways, the combined noise impact on their location of the proposed RNAV 4 left procedure and the existing 4 right RNAV procedure, and compare that noise impact level to noise impact levels at other locations. I'm going to ask Rhonda to answer this one. And if my memory serves me, this is one of the questions that was requested by our local congressional delegation.
Thank you, Colleen. The noise visualization tool allows a user to understand the expected noise impact at a specific location. The tool provides a noise level for what the noise exposure would be without the proposed procedure and what the noise exposure would be with the proposed procedure. This allows for a full understanding of the noise impacts of this action at specific locations.
Okay, so I think this kind of goes back to Steve, you were helping further explain the noise visualization tool a little bit earlier. Maybe you can just kind of walk us through that explanation again.
Sure, and yes, so the noise visualization tool, so it shows the results of the noise analysis as well as the noise analysis on the local parks, aka Section 4F properties, and historic resources. And for each one of those properties, it shows both the baseline noise exposure and the alternative noise exposure. The baseline noise exposure is the noise exposure impacts, is noise exposure from all of the activity, all of the existing activity, both arrivals and departures at Boston Logan Airport without the proposed new procedure. And then the alternative noise exposure is the noise exposure expected for all activity at Boston Logan, but with the proposed procedure added in. And for this specific question, I would add that the noise visualization tool does show, and this was per request, it shows the Boston Logan RNAV GPS runway 4 right existing procedure. There is a layer for that. It is at the bottom of the layer list and is titled Boston Logan RNAV GPS runway 4 right, and then parentheses existing procedure.
Okay, so if a resident in that area can turn on that layer, see both.
They can see both the
paths.
4 right GPS existing procedure and the proposed 4 left.
Right, and then click on one of the population centroids, and that would bring up the baseline noise exposure, which is all operations, and then the alternative,
Without the proposed.
and the alternative, which is with the new procedure.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. So next, I just want to do another reminder. I know we've had some new folks join us on the workshop. So questions and comments made during the workshop will not be considered as official comments on the draft environmental assessment. If you'd like to make an official comment, please go to faabostonworkshops.com to make an online comment. Email a comment to the email address on the screen, faabostonworkshops@esassoc.com, or mail it to the address on the screen. The comment period closes on November 20th. Additionally, questions asked during this workshop that are repetitive may not be answered. We're unable to answer questions about any other topic during this workshop or if submitted as an official comment to the draft EA. Okay, the next question. Please provide a version of the noise visualization as in question 2 for the baseline year. With regard to the baseline year, please also explain A, on what basis has the FAA used November 1st, 2018 through October 31st, 2019 as the baseline year, rather than the baseline year used in its March 23rd, 2016 IER contained in Appendix A to the draft EA? And I'm going to ask Donovan to answer that one, please.
Sure. So kind of a two-part question here. First, with respect to the noise visualization, there actually is a 4-right RNAV path available, as Steve mentioned, on the noise visualization tool. For the second part that asks why we use the November 1st, 2018 to October 31st, 2019 as the baseline year, it's primarily because since the 2016 IER, the traffic at the airport has grown substantially. as well as the fact that the traffic mix has changed. So that specific baseline was chosen because at the beginning of the project, because it better represented the most recent data that was available at the time, and absolutely better represented current conditions. Also keeping in mind that the JetBlue procedure that was included in the 2016 IER is no longer in use.
This is Veranda. I'd like to add that the IER stands for Initial Environmental Review.
Cool.
So Donovan, when you talk about the traffic at the airport has grown substantially since 2016, I think for our Massport friends right now, they'd probably say, doesn't look too good right now. So I think what you're saying is today, the traffic is at, unfortunately, fairly low levels due to the public health pandemic. But during the period, of the study period, it was kind of typical traffic. But would you qualify that as highest or maximum seen?
I would, yeah, the traffic at Boston, as I'm sure many people in the local area know, has grown significantly over the course of the past few years prior to the coronavirus pandemic. So I would say that represented basically a 10-year high for Boston traffic based on the time that we started the study. Obviously today it's far different, unfortunately, but we chose it based on what the worst possible scenario was at that time.
So the next question is, can this approach be used or can a future procedure be built as a SOIA approach for 4 left with 4 right? And I'm going to ask Rusty to translate that for us and then answer it.
Hey, Colleen, I'd be glad to. So SOIA is a simultaneous offset instrument approach by definition. And currently, yes, this new procedure is designed to comply with the requirements of the SOIA. So yes, this approach could be used as an SOIA operation.
Okay, next question is for Veranda. When and how did the procedure originate?
Thank you, Colleen. The FAA proposed a permanent implementation of procedure in 2015. Since that time, the agency has been coordinating with Massport, airlines, elected officials of potentially affected communities, and community advisory committees on the need for the proposed procedure. Initial environmental reviews indicated that the proposed procedure would not result in reportable or significant noise impacts over noise-sensitive areas. In September 2019, the agency contracted with a consultant to develop an environmental assessment for the proposed procedure.
Okay, next, I think is a follow-up question from one of the previous. And it starts with, you do not answer this aspect of my question. Please answer the expected number of flights part of this question. The number of RNAV of expected visual flight paths, the expected number of advisory use flights, in other words, RNAV, visual, advisory, expected first year number of 4 left arrivals of each type. And I'm going to ask Rusty to answer that one, please.
Okay, Colleen. So historically in pre-COVID conditions, approximately 12,000 aircraft landed annually on runway 4 left using a visual approach. There is no instrument approach procedure to 4 left in use today. There is no instrument landing system on runway 4 left. It is expected that the procedure under study here will increase the number of arrivals to runway 4 left by 359 operations a year. And this is a relatively small number, this is a relatively small increase as it will be used primarily in poor weather conditions that we talked about earlier, fog, rain, snow, low ceilings, when aircraft must land using the instrument flight procedures. Please see section 4.6 and appendix D of the draft environmental assessment for more information on what parameters were used in the study.
Thanks, Rusty. Next question is for Donovan. What is the margin of error associated with your estimated DNL post-implementation?
Okay, thanks, Colleen. So the ADT model models the average annual day DNL noise exposure using validated aircraft-specific noise and performance information. And it actually does produce quite highly accurate and repeatable environmental outcomes. However, all environmental models produce some level of error, and ADT has been designed to produce accurate results that actually exceed the requirements to identify noise impacts for DNL at or above the 65 dB DNL range. Where uncertainties in the model do exist, we've gone in and made conservative assumptions to ensure that we do not underpredict noise exposure associated with the proposed action.
Okay, next question. In a non-COVID environment, would this workshop be conducted as an in-person interactive meeting? So normally, yes, we would hold this type of meeting in person. But right now, we can't hold in-person workshops because public health officials are advising against large gatherings of people, and they're strongly recommending social distancing. Also, many meeting venues remain closed due to the ongoing concerns about COVID. Okay. I think we've got through most of the questions that have come in. I'm going to just throw one out because I'm the moderator and I get to do that. So I'm going to ask our pilot, Captain Willie, to talk a little bit about the use of the procedure and from a pilot's perspective, what are some of the challenges today and how will this new procedure help?
All right, Colleen. As we said today, the fore-left approach is a visual approach only, and that requires certain meteorological conditions to be at or above, and Rusty referred to that earlier. It requires that the ceiling be at or above 1,000 feet from the ground level, and it requires a minimum of 3 miles of visibility, if not more. Additionally, we have to be able to see the runway at all times to accept a visual approach clearance from our air traffic control brethren. One of the standard operating procedures that most airlines use is that we use all navigational aids possible to help us shoot an approach or to make an approach. That includes even visual approaches. In this case, by having fore-left getting an instrument approach for the future, this allows us to bring up more cues in the flight deck to be able to fly a lateral and vertical path to the runway on a repeatable and predictable manner. Under visual approaches with no instrument approaches as we have today, that is something less predictable and less easy to do. It is perfectly safe. We fly visual approaches all the time. But again, we are always looking to make things more safe. And by having an instrument approach, I can now fly a visual approach with an instrument backup. Additionally, as Rusty talked about, when the weather goes below these minimums required for visual approaches, we can now utilize that runway in a safe manner using established RNAV GPS instrument approach procedures, which again, these are things we do now to other runways. Hope that answers your question.
It does, thanks. And you probably just answered the question that just came in, which I'm going to read the question, but I guess you can tell me. I don't think it needs another answer. But we have been hearing about the possibility of this new approach for years. You said it was a safety improvement. Does this mean it's unsafe now?
Yeah, like I said, I hope we answered it, but no, visual approaches are not unsafe. We just are improving our safety margins by adding the instrument approach, and it allows pilots to do under visual conditions have an instrument backup, again, to be able to do repeatable and predictable paths, both vertically and laterally. And then under instrument conditions, obviously, to utilize that runway.
Okay, thanks. And let me just reiterate. So on bad weather days, the traffic will have this additional runway with an instrument approach procedure, which would reduce the amount of delays and potential cancellations, and also would reduce the time where flights are coming in to land at Logan that sometimes back up into the early morning hours. So hopefully the use of this procedure would allow the flights to come in earlier, and therefore reducing late night arrivals, which reduces late night noise. Okay, my next question is, were mitigation strategies considered to avoid schools and hospitals, such as Milton Academy, Glover Elementary School in Milton, and Milton Hospital? Are there health and safety concerns to operating such a tight, concentrated flight path, parentheses, noise and emissions? Donovan?
Sure, thanks, Colleen. So the noise impacts at each of these facilities were calculated, and they were determined to be below the threshold of significance that the FAA has set, and also not rising to the level of a reportable impact either. The FAA's number one priority is obviously safety of the national airspace system, but the FAA does consider environmental impacts of proposed procedures. The draft EA indicates that the proposed procedure would meet all applicable environmental requirements and does not reach the threshold of significance for any of these schools or the hospital. And you can also read more about the noise and air emissions in Chapter 4 of the draft EA.
Okay, next question. Could the FAA use 4 left as a way to disperse operations from the heavily used runway 4 right for approaches? If not, why not? Rusty?
Okay, Colleen, thank you. And as Doug talked about, this procedure is, we just feel like it's a necessary procedure to provide vertical and lateral guidance to runway 4 left. And the purpose and the need of this project is to publish that new instrument procedure. As part of the draft environmental assessment, we did not study using runway 4 left to reduce the number of arrivals on 4 right.
Colleen, can I add something to that as well? So essentially, part of the 359 additional operations to runway 4 left that we anticipate would happen as a result of this new procedure, of that number, 104 of those are anticipated to be flights that would have landed on runway 4 right later in the night, evening, or been canceled. And they are now able to operate to the airport under those weather conditions due to the additional throughput during IMC conditions. So I just wanted to add that we did not study using runway 4 left to reduce the number of arrivals on runway 4 right. However, due to the effects of implementing the procedure, you do get some reduction of arrivals for runway 4 night in those particular weather conditions.
Okay, next question is in relation to the slide that was shown earlier for comments. The question is, the slide just shown for comments does not appear to have the city shown for the ESA mailing address. Perhaps it's just my computer. So let me read off that address. It's Environmental Science Associates, care of Boston Logan RNAV, parentheses GPS, approach EA, 4200 West Cypress Street, Suite 450, Tampa, Florida, 33607. Or you can email to FAA Boston Workshops at ESA@ssOC.com. And since that question came up, I'm just going to have that slide brought up again and give the full reminder that questions and comments made during the workshop will not be considered as official comments on the draft environmental assessment. To make an official comment, please go to FAABostonWorkshops.com to make an online comment. Email a comment to FAA Boston Workshops at ESA@ssOC.com, or mail it to the address on the screen. The comment period closes on November 20th. And looks to me like that person was right, that we are missing a little bit of information on that slide. So we will get that corrected. And then just an additional reminder that questions asked during this workshop that are repetitive may not be answered. And we're unable to answer questions about any other topic during this workshop or if submitted as an official comment to the draft EA. Next question is, do you measure the noise? Measure is in all caps, so that's adding an emphasis there. Are there noise monitors out there in the neighborhoods? And did you use those to calculate noise levels? Donovan?
Sure, thanks, Colleen. So to calculate the impacts of this proposed project, the FAA is actually required to use noise modeling rather than direct noise measurements. And noise modeling actually has a benefit by allowing the FAA to actually estimate noise levels over a wide geographic area. In order to do the same thing by directly measuring noise, we'd actually have to have noise monitors at each individual physical place, which would be tens of thousands of noise monitors, and is impractical for this type of effort. Another additional benefit of noise modeling is that it also allows the FAA to estimate noise level of future aircraft operations, which you can't do with a direct noise measurement. So to answer the question, no, we did not directly measure the noise in the neighborhoods.
Okay, next question again is, this one's a little bit lengthy. Please provide a version of the noise visualization as in question 2 for the baseline year. With regard to the baseline year, please also explain, is it correct that the draft EA does not measure noise impacts of consolidating the JetBlue special procedure with the 4 left visual path into a single RNAV path? And is it correct that the draft EA only measures the noise impact of incremental 4 left arrivals due to implementation of RNAV capability to use 4 left in IMC conditions? And I'm going to ask Veranda to answer that one, please.
Thank you, Colleen. Potential use of the JetBlue special procedure is not considered as part of this environmental assessment. The JetBlue special procedure has not been used since 2014. And there are no future plans to use that procedure at this time. The draft environmental assessment noise analysis considers all traffic in the baseline year with the proposed procedure. You could see section 4.6 and also in appendix D of the draft environmental assessment for more information.
Okay, next question. I didn't hear the answer to my question about the AAR. And for the visual weather conditions when 4 right, 4 left /9 configuration after 4 left RNAV implementation. He just gave us the instrument weather conditions. So I'll ask Rusty to answer that.
Sure, Colleen, my apologies for that. So when the RNAV GPS runway 4 left approach procedure, if it is implemented in a runway 4-9 configuration at Boston, the visual arrival acceptance rate would be 62.
And the next question is for Veranda. Does the FAA expect that the 4 left or the 4 right RNAV will be amended to include side steps?
Okay. No, the runway 4 right and 4 left are too far apart to conduct sidestep approaches.
Okay, next question. What is the purpose of the proposed new procedure and who will benefit? Donovan.
Sure, thank you, Colleen. So implementing the RNAV GPS runway 4 left approach procedure it's critical for flight safety. It'll enable pilots to land on the runway in bad weather, and it'll also make Logan International Airport as well as the National Aerospace System as a whole more efficient. The proposed new procedure is planned to closely follow existing flight tracks, and the pilots and air traffic controllers can use the latest technology to guide aircraft to land on the runway. Under current conditions at this airport, as we said before, it's only visual approach available. And that's the only way that you can land at the airport currently. So adding safety is the primary benefit, and the primary beneficiaries are ATC as well as pilots who both have more repeatability in their ability to land on that runway.
Okay, thanks. Okay, next question is for Rusty. Are you putting in these procedures so the airlines can operate more flights?
So Colleen, this proposed procedure will not increase the demand at the Boston Logan Airport. However, it will enable air traffic controllers to better manage air traffic on bad weather days. We designed the procedure to allow flights to safely and more efficiently arrive at and depart from the Boston Airport. They are not designed to accommodate a higher number of flights. And with that in mind, the FAA is not responsible for the demands of the market when it comes to how many planes there are and how many planes depart or arrive. Our job is to safely manage the system as a whole. We're balancing the needs of multiple users and stakeholders, which includes airports and communities, as we implement this important procedure for Boston.
Okay, next question. Can you summarize the impact of the proposed procedure on flight counts at the airport? Donovan?
Sure. Thanks, Colleen. So generally speaking, the impact of flight counts at the airport should be minimal. When visibility is low, weather is poor, flights will now be able to land on runway 4 left where they cannot do that today, which will help to reduce delays that result in late night arrivals at the airport. However, how often this happens is variable depending on what the weather is like that year. If you have a year where you have a lot of potentially bad weather days, with the wind conditions that allow this procedure to be used, there'll be more. Whereas conversely, if you have a very good weather year, you'll have very, very little change from today.
Okay, thanks, Donovan. Next question is, what's wrong with the way things are being done now? Why do we need to make any changes to the current flights around the airport? Rusty?
Okay, Colleen, so I'll answer that from an air traffic perspective, and maybe Doug can weigh in from a pilot's perspective. But currently, runway 4 left does not have a published instrument approach procedure, which restricts landing on 4 left during periods of bad weather. By implementing the new procedure, it will allow aircraft to land on runway 4 left during periods of bad weather. And this should, as you said earlier, Colleen, reduce nighttime delays to Boston.
Okay, Doug, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think we've pretty much answered the question about, again, having an extra instrument approach to the runway allows us to do both in visual conditions as it is today, as well as lower instrument conditions, as Rusty's alluded to have repeatable and safe vertical and lateral guidance, which again, just lends for a safer operation. It's always been safe under visual. It just allows for more opportunities in other types of conditions as well.
Okay, thanks. So we just have a couple minutes left, and see if we can get a couple short questions in. So next one is, how do I find the noise level in my neighborhood? And Steve, I'm going to ask you to cover that one.
Sure. I feel like I'm the evangelist for this visualization tool. So to find the noise level in your neighborhood, you can use the noise visualization tool found on the project website, FAABostonWorkshops.com. You can see the calculated noise levels as part of the noise analysis, which are done for each census block around the general study area, as well as the potential impacts on historic sites and Section 4F properties, AKA local and state parks.
Great, thanks. And the last question is, where can I see the Boston draft EA? FAABostonWorkshops.com has links to the draft EA, the full document in PDF format, and also other information about the project. The draft EA can be found at a number of Boston area libraries, but the easiest place to locate it would be on the project website. And with that, we will close. I want to personally thank you for all joining us today for our virtual workshop. We hope that you found the information we presented informative and instructive as to your understanding of the proposed procedure and the draft environmental assessment. We'll be holding a second public workshop next week on Wednesday, October 28th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. And we'll welcome you to join us then if you have additional questions. If you'd like to watch this workshop again, or you know people in the community who were unable to attend but wanted to, the workshop has been recorded and will be posted on FAABostonWorkshops.com and the FAA's YouTube page. If you would like to make an official comment on the draft environmental assessment, please go to FAABostonWorkshops.com to make an online comment. Email a comment to FAA Boston Workshops at ESASSOC.com or mail it to the address on the screen. The comment period closes on November 20th. Thank you very much for attending this virtual public workshop for the draft environmental assessment of the proposed RNAV GPS approach procedure at Boston Logan International Airport.